By the summer of 1945, the Second World War had raged across the globe for nearly 6 relentless years. Cities from London to Dresden lay in ruins. Millions had perished, and yet Japan remained unbroken. The Pacific War, once dominated by the Imperial Japanese Navy, had turned into a slow, grinding struggle that tested the limits of endurance on both sides. The United States, after years of bloody island-hopping campaigns, from Guadalcanal to Iwo Jima, stood poised at Japan's doorstep, but Tokyo showed no sign of surrender. In Washington, President Harry S. Truman faced an agonizing choice. After the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt in April 1945, the weight of the war had fallen squarely upon his shoulders. His military advisors warned that a full-scale invasion of Japan, codenamed Operation Downfall, could cost as many as 1 million American lives, not to mention millions more Japanese soldiers and civilians. The war in Europe had ended with Germany's unconditional surrender in May, but the Pacific Front was still burning. The world wanted peace, yet the path to it was lined with blood. Meanwhile, in the secret laboratories of Los Alamos, New Mexico, a weapon beyond imagination had been born, under the direction of J. Robert Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project. Thousands of scientists had worked in silence to create a device that could unleash the power of the atom itself. On July 16, 1945, the first atomic bomb was tested in the desert of Alamogordo. The blast illuminated the night sky with a terrible brilliance. Oppenheimer recalled words from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." That same month, at the Potsdam Conference in Germany, Truman met with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Behind closed doors, the leaders discussed the future of a world scarred by war. During these talks, Truman received a coded message. The atomic test had succeeded. The balance of power had shifted. The United States now held a weapon capable of ending the war or destroying civilization itself. The Potsdam Declaration, issued on July 26, demanded Japan's unconditional surrender. It warned of prompt and utter destruction if Japan refused. Yet the Japanese government, led by Prime Minister Kentaro Suzuki, chose silence. The word he used, mokusatsu, was translated as ignore, and that single word sealed Japan's fate. In Tokyo, the military leadership refused to accept defeat. Even as American bombers reduced city after city to ashes, the emperor's advisors hoped for a negotiated peace that would preserve Japan's imperial throne. To the Japanese people, surrender was unthinkable, a dishonor worse than death. Back in the United States, the Target Committee met to determine where this new weapon would be used. Hiroshima, a city of military importance with its army headquarters and factories, was chosen as the primary target. The city had been spared from previous bombings, making it a perfect test to measure the weapon's destructive power. As August approached, the final preparations began on Tinian Island in the Pacific. The B-29 bomber Enola Gay, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, was selected to carry the uranium bomb known as Little Boy. Technicians worked under strict secrecy, assembling the device that would soon change history forever. Few among them truly understood what they were preparing to unleash. Some scientists warned that the detonation could ignite the atmosphere itself. Others believed it would end the war instantly. There was no consensus, only urgency. The night before the mission, Tibbets addressed his crew. The men listened in silence, aware that they were about to carry out the most consequential operation in human history. At dawn on August 6, 1945, as the engines roared to life, none of them could have imagined the magnitude of what awaited. The road to Hiroshima had been long, paved with ambition, desperation, and the unrelenting logic of total war. The decision had been made, and history had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. Humanity stood on the brink of a new age, one defined not by victory or defeat, but by the shadow of the atom. At dawn on August 6, 1945, the city of Hiroshima stirred to life under a calm, cloudless sky. The war had dragged on for years, but that morning felt unusually quiet. School children gathered to help clear fire breaks, women prepared breakfast, and factory workers began their daily routines. To most residents, it was another morning in a war that felt endless. Few could imagine that in just moments, their city would become the center of the most destructive event in human history. At 2:45 a.m., on the island of Tinian, a silver B-29 bomber named Enola Gay lifted off the runway. On board was the world's first atomic bomb used for warfare, a device called Little Boy. Colonel Paul Tibbets commanded the mission, assisted by a crew of 11 men. The flight path would take them over Iwo Jima, then north toward Hiroshima, a city chosen precisely because it had been spared from previous air raids. The U.S. military wanted to see the full effect of the new weapon on an untouched target. By 7:30 a.m., air raid sirens sounded briefly over Hiroshima. A lone weather reconnaissance plane had flown overhead, but when no attack followed, the all-clear was given. Residents returned to their tasks, unaware that a second plane, flying high above the city, was marking the target. Beneath that quiet blue sky, time ticked toward destruction. At 8:15 a.m., Bombardier Major Thomas Farabee released Little Boy from the bomb bay. The weapon fell silently for 43 seconds before detonating 1,900 feet above the city. What followed was beyond human comprehension. In an instant, the sky erupted into a blinding white flash, a light so intense that those looking toward it were vaporized where they stood. The temperature at the center of the explosion reached over 1,000,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the surface of the sun. A massive fireball expanded outward, flattening everything within a 2-kilometer radius. Wooden houses burst into flames. Concrete buildings crumbled. People within half a mile simply ceased to exist. Their shadows burned into the ground and walls. The shockwave traveled at hundreds of miles per hour, shattering windows up to 10 miles away. Those caught in the blast were thrown through the air, their skin burned away by the heat. Fires erupted across the city, merging into a roaring firestorm that consumed everything in its path. Within minutes, Hiroshima, a city of 350,000 people, had been turned into a sea of flames. For those who survived the initial explosion, the nightmare had only begun. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and ash. The once clear morning sky turned black as day became night. Survivors stumbled through the ruins, their clothes burned to rags, their skin hanging in tatters. They cried for water, for help, for loved ones who would never answer. A strange, oily rain began to fall, black with radioactive soot. Doctors, nurses, and emergency workers who had not been killed rushed to treat the wounded, but hospitals had been destroyed. Medical supplies were gone. Thousands lay on the ground, silent or moaning softly, waiting for death. Many drank contaminated water and died within hours. No one understood what had happened. Some believed the entire city had been hit by a new kind of incendiary bomb. Others thought the sun itself had fallen from the sky. At 10 a.m., the mushroom cloud still towered over the city, reaching more than 13 kilometers high. From a distance, pilots aboard Enola Gay and the accompanying observation planes could only watch in stunned silence. Even they had not imagined destruction of this scale. Colonel Tibbets later wrote that as they turned for home, he could see a column of boiling dust and fire rising fast to 30,000 feet, and below it, a black, boiling mass that spread and swirled like a monstrous storm. By nightfall, Hiroshima was gone. Nearly 80,000 people had perished instantly. Tens of thousands more would die in the following weeks from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness, a form of death humanity had never seen before. Survivors' hair fell out, their wounds refused to heal, and fever consumed their bodies. The streets were filled with corpses, the rivers with the dying who had crawled there seeking water. News of the event spread slowly. In Tokyo, military officials first dismissed reports as exaggerated. But by the next day, reconnaissance flights confirmed the truth. Hiroshima had vanished. President Truman announced to the world that the United States had used a new weapon of unusual destructive force. He warned Japan to surrender or face a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. The day the sun fell on Hiroshima was not only a tragedy for one city, it was the birth of a new era. For the first time, mankind had unlocked the power to annihilate itself. The atomic age had begun, and the line between victory and catastrophe had been erased forever. In the days following August 6, 1945, Hiroshima ceased to exist as a living city. It had become a silent wasteland of twisted steel, scorched earth, and endless grief. The survivors, those who would later be called Hibakusha, wandered through ruins searching for family, food, or simply a reason to keep breathing. Their bodies were burned and swollen, their skin peeling like paper. Many carried invisible wounds, radiation poisoning that would slowly consume them from within. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb, this one called Fat Man, fell on the city of Nagasaki. Once again, the sky was split open by fire, and tens of thousands more died in an instant. The world, still reeling from Hiroshima, watched as another city was erased. Japan's leaders, faced with the reality of total annihilation, could no longer deny the inevitable. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito addressed his people for the first time in history. His voice, carried across radio waves, was calm yet heavy with sorrow. He told the nation that Japan must endure the unendurable and accept surrender to avoid the extinction of civilization. For millions of Japanese citizens, his words were the sound of both defeat and salvation. The Second World War, the deadliest conflict in human history, was finally over. But peace brought no comfort to Hiroshima. In the weeks after the bombing, the full horror of radiation sickness began to unfold. People who had seemed uninjured suddenly collapsed. Their gums bled, hair fell out, and strange purple blotches spread across their skin. Doctors were powerless. No one understood what radiation was or how to treat it. The few hospitals still standing were filled with the dying. Mothers clutched their children as both faded away in silence. Foreign correspondents who entered Hiroshima in late August described scenes beyond imagination. Miles of flattened city stretched in every direction. Shadows of people were etched into stone steps, permanent silhouettes of lives erased in a heartbeat. Birds avoided the city. The rivers ran black with ash and debris. The smell of death lingered in the air for months. Scientists who studied the aftermath realized that humanity had crossed a line it could never uncross. The atomic bomb was not just another weapon, it was a transformation of war itself. A single plane, a single bomb could destroy an entire city. Nations that once measured power in tanks and soldiers now faced a terrifying truth. Survival itself depended on who held the atom. In the years that followed, Hiroshima became a symbol. The ruins were cleared and survivors rebuilt, but the memory of that morning could never be erased. The Peace Memorial Dome, one of the few structures that remained standing, was left untouched as a warning. Each August, bells would ring and paper lanterns would float down the river to honor the dead. Yet the shadows of the atomic age stretched far beyond Japan. Across the world, nations raced to develop their own nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union tested its first bomb in 1949, and soon the United States and USSR were locked in an arms race that threatened global annihilation. The Cold War was born out of the same fire that had consumed Hiroshima. Deterrence became the new form of peace, a fragile balance built on the fear of mutual destruction. For the survivors, life continued under the burden of memory. Many faced discrimination and illness for decades. Their stories, once ignored, would later become a moral voice against the spread of nuclear arms. They spoke not with anger, but with warning, of the cost of forgetting what happened when the sun fell from the sky. The bombing of Hiroshima marked the end of one war and the beginning of a new era, an age defined by both human ingenuity and its darkest potential. The light that had destroyed Hiroshima was not merely the dawn of victory. It was a mirror showing mankind what it had become capable of. From that day forward, every generation would live under the same shadow, the knowledge that in one moment humanity could end itself. Hiroshima's ruins became not only a memorial to the past but a message to the future. That peace is fragile, and the power to destroy the world must never again be unleashed. The atomic age began with silence, a silence that still echoes across history.